We are here to preview UFC 240 coming out of Edmonton, Canada. But first of all, Dan, fresh back from Texas. Boom with the left. Massive congrats, mate.
Thanks. I appreciate it. It's good to be back on home soil. Though.
Good to be back in the top 15 too.
Yeah, no, that's having a little number next to your name always gets people excited and gets you big fights. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to the October 6th card, which just got announced in Melbourne.
Are you on it?
Israel vs. Robert headlining. Well, I've reached out to the UFC. I've let them know that.
Reached out. That sounds very polite.
Sounds polite. I demanded to be on the card pretty much. And must be a hard man to argue with because they seem to accept, and we're kind of just looking for an opponent at this stage. So I think it's 10 weeks to go. So I'm confident we'll get an opponent by then.
Who decides the opponent?
The matchmaker, Sean Shelby. He's in charge of my work. So there's two matchmakers in the UFC, Mick Maynard and Sean Shelby, and they take care of different weight divisions. But Sean Shelby is the matchmaker for my weight division.
Do they ask you? Or
Dana just does the like the big fights. Like he's like,
fights.
I want to see John Jones fight DC, and he calls them both up and pretty much makes them do it. But yeah, for a majority of the work, it's Sean Shelby.
And does he ask you or does he tell you?
I hear you can ask. I hear you. There's like you can have like a bit of a negotiation, but the name arrives and I say yes.
And you you don't care what the name is.
I've never argued with the name. He's always been pretty good to me. I've always got exciting matchups and exciting fights. Like he tends to just kind of match the boring guys with the boring guys, the exciting guys with the exciting guys. So he keeps me. Exciting matchups.
Awesome. Well, it was exciting in Texas, mate, and you took out a Texan on his home ground, which is, a big thing to do. So, again, congrats. And let's work our way through the matchups that are going to go down in Edmonton this weekend, and 12 fights. First up, we've got Tanner Bosa making his UFC debut, as is his opponent, Giacomo Lemos, 6-0 in his professional career. And he's a warmish favourite making his debut.
Yeah, so Bosa is the number one ranked Canadian heavyweight, so it's on Canadian soil, so it makes sense that they get a big boy in there for the fans. But he's 10 of his last 12 fights have gone to decision, and he is point fighter verging on happy to make it a very boring fight. Lemos, he's a big boy. He's a physically imposing guy. For a heavyweight, but he lacks any real technique. I would just pick him down as a brawler. I feel like he's just been put on this card to make the Canadian look good and pick up a win. I feel like Boss is just going to outpoint him, make it a very boring fight and pick up a decision.
Next fight, can't split him. Price-wise, exactly the same. Erich Koch against Kyle Stewart. 10th UFC fight for Erich, whereas Kyle Stewart's only had one in the UFC and he lost.
Yeah, so Koch is a bit of an anomaly. So he was a number one ranked featherweight in the world in 2012 until he was forced to pull out against his title shot against Jose Aldo. Since then, he's gone 2 wins and 5 losses. And he's lost his last 2, and this will be his first fight back in 18 months. And he was fighting, his last 2 were at lightweight, and now this fight is at welterweight. So it's a very strange turn of events and turn of career for Koch. Stewart, he's a dangerous striker. He's going to come into this with a size advantage. He's 4 inches taller than Koch. He's the bigger man, and I just see him outpointing Koch on the feet. I feel like the time off, the 2 bigger change in weight classes will impact him, and Stewart just cruises to a decision.
First of the women's fights is in the flyweight division. Jillian Robertson, really good amateur record, 6-4 as a pro. A slight favourite against Sarah Frota. It's her 11th fight in 3 years. She's been very busy. She lost her first fight in the UFC. I think her last fight was the first fight in the UFC. Lost in a split decision. Even-ish, but we've gone slight favourite Jillian Robertson.
Yep. So Robertson has a fairly impressive UFC record. She's 3 submission wins and 1 submission loss in the UFC. Fotona, yeah, she was undefeated, and then she lost her UFC debut. She also missed weight for that by 7 pounds, which is 3.5 kilos. So it's a pretty big miss in weight for such a light women's division. And in that fight, she was just easily out-wrestled. Fotona's size will give Robertson trouble at the start of the fight, but then as she wears down because she's carrying that bigger weight, I see Robertson just out-wrestling her, controlling her on the ground, and Robertson via decision.
3 fights down, 2 underdog wins so far predicted. I like it. Good even fights though, and a lot of these fights are really even. And this next one, we've got the number 3 ranked versus the number 4 ranked. Again, dead even in the head-to-head. We've got Pantoja, 21-3 pro record. 5 wins, 1 loss in his last 6, all in the UFC. And Figueiredo won his first 4 fights in the UFC, but lost his last one by decision. Really even, this one.
I'm picking this as my fight of the night.
Really?
This is going to be an exciting matchup. These are two of the most exciting flyweights that are running around. Yeah, Pantoja, he was the number 1 seed on the Ultimate Fighter series, so the series that Kai Kara France, the Kiwi boy, was on. He actually beat Kai via decision in that season. He ultimately went out in the semi-finals, but he's amassed since then a UFC record of 5 wins and only the 1 loss. His most recent win was over Wilson Hayes in April. He has 9 submissions on his record and 7 KOs. So whether it's on the feet or on the ground, he's very good at getting guys out of there. Yeah, Figueiredo, 3 of his first 4 UFC appearances, he won via KO. And 8 of his 15 stoppages have come in the first round. So for a flyweight fighter, he packs an incredible punch, and he's an incredibly powerful striker. I feel like Pantoja will he has to shoot on Figueiredo early, and he has to try and get him to the ground. I just figure that Figueiredo's scrambling game and his ability to get back to his feet is too much. He forces this into a striking fight, where in the striking he carries more power than Pantoja, and I'm actually picking him to knock Pantoja out in the 3rd.
And the fight of the night bonus as well.
Yeah, it's going to be one heck of a fight. Like, flyweights bring a heck of a pace, and both these guys can finish people for flyweights. So, man, I'm looking forward to that one.
Canada versus South Korea in the next one. Gavin Tucker, 10-1 in his pro career, 1-1 in his UFC. Against Seungwoo Choi, had a UFC debut last start, but lost by decision in April. So reasonably quick turnaround from the South Korean. The slightest of favourites, the hometown boy Tucker.
Yeah, so Tucker, he came into the UFC with a lot of hype because he had 8 of his 9 wins were stoppage victories early, in his pro career. And then he was a massive favourite going into his fight with Rick the Gladiator Glenn. He was a huge, he was paying a lot of money going into that fight, and he just got smashed. He got steamrolled against a guy that he should have beaten. The last round, the 3rd round in that fight against Rick Glenn, was actually a 10-7 round. He was getting beat up so bad. So that was in 2017. So this is his first fight back since that. So I feel like he's coming into this, with a lot of questions hanging over his name. Choi, 5 of his pro wins have come via KO. 3 of them in the first round. So he's a big power puncher. He was out-wrestled in his debut. It was a short-notice debut in Russia, and he was kind of just out-wrestled, outclassed in the wrestling in that fight. But in this fight, he's going to be 4 inches taller and have an 8-inch reach advantage over Tucker. That's big. He's a tough, relentless swinger. He likes to come forward, and I feel like his size and his power advantage would be too much. And I feel like it'll carry Choi to a decision in this one.
Another underdog.
Mate, it's the day of the dogs.
Day of the
dogs.
Woof, woof. Boy, if the underdog won this next fight, it'd be a bit of an upset with Dawodu taking on Yoshinori Hoary.
Well, Hoary's the underdog, right?
Hoary's the underdog. He's 8-1, making his UFC debut. Dawodu in the last 3 fights has gone loss, win in the UFC. He's a warm favourite.
Yeah, I don't think the underdog's going to catch this one. So Dawodu, he's a super hot prospect. He was coming into the UFC, but he lost his UFC debut via like a 39-second guillotine. He just got caught in a submission early in his debut. Since then, he's rolled off 2 decision victories, very impressive opponents, Austin Arnett and Kyle Bogniak, and 6 of his stoppage wins are all via knockout. The Japanese fighter, octagon debut, he's a fast starter. One of his last 7 fights have gone past the second round. So he comes out hot and he puts the pressure on early. But this is probably the most lopsided fight, in my opinion, on the card. I feel like Dawodu has the skill and power advantage. Because of the fast start, I think it'll be a pretty competitive first round. But Dawodu, I'm pegging him to knock the Japanese kid out.
Turn the page and we have a Brazilian in Vivian Arazu against Alexis Davis. It's interesting here. The Brazilian is ranked 15. Davis is ranked 8. Brazilian's a hot favourite. 4-fight win streak. Davis is a 12-year pro, 19-9, but lost the last 2 fights. But 12 years in the pros for a woman's quite a long career.
Yeah, it's incredibly long. She's on a 2-fight losing streak at the moment. But she had a good account of herself in those fights. It's not like she was incredibly outclassed. So they were competitive fights. She just wasn't on the right side of some of the exchanges. She has 8 submission wins by either rear naked choke or armbar. So once it hits the mat, she's very deadly with either the rear naked or the armbar. Arazu made her debut short notice. And I'm not sure if you remember this fight, but if you see the knockout, I'm sure you'll remember it. She hit the girl with the cracker, and it was one of the most impressive one-punch knockouts that I've ever seen a female from the female divisions. It was incredibly powerful. I don't feel like Davis has the wrestling chops to get Arazu to the ground in this one, and Arazu is just the more powerful striker, and I feel like she does pick up the decision.
Oh, I wrote KO. I'm changing it to decision. Poland versus Canada in the middleweight. The Pole comes in as a $1.50 favourite against Barrio, I'm going to say, the Canadian, $2.35. And Krzysztof Jotko broke a 3-loss streak in the UFC, won his last fight. But those 3 losses were against top quality fighters. Top quality, and I think that's probably why he's favourite. Whereas the Canadian lost his UFC debut in his latest fight. 11-2 career pro, but lost his last UFC fight.
Yeah, he dropped a decision. Previously, he was on an 8-fight unbeaten streak. Jotko, he's kind of a perennial gatekeeper in the division. He's a guy that's always there, but doesn't seem to beat the higher echelon in the division. But he always beats the newer guys coming through. Jotko, he's very good at point fighting, very good at dancing on the outside, maintaining his distance, staying out of danger while picking up points and throwing kicks from range. No beating around the bush here. I feel Jotko gets the decision.
Canada against Armenia. Don't see many fighters coming out of Armenia, and his name's Armin as well. Armin Zarukian against Olivier Aubin Mercier. Mercier lost his last 2 UFC fights, and Zarukian is only 22 years old and has lost twice as a pro, including his last fight. But the young fella is quite a warm favourite against the local.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was wondering how the bookies will see this one. Because Mercier, he was, I believe, like a once-ranked lightweight coming into it. He's out of TriStar, which is GSP's gym. He's one of GSP's training partners, one of his little proteges. And his last 2 losses, Alexander Hernandez and Gilbert Burns. So 2, top 15 fighters in the world, 2 very well-respected lightweights. He does his best work on the ground. He averages just over 2.5 takedowns a fight, just controls people on the ground and generally picks up a decision. The Armenian, he made his UFC debut against Islam Makhachev. And that was an incredible contest. The scrambles in this fight and the wrestling exchanges were a lot of fighters were talking about that for a few weeks after it was such an exciting and technical battle. I'm going to go with the Armenian in this fight. I feel like the last 2 losses that Mercier has picked up has shown some holes in his game, that he's like a very muscle-bound lightweight, and he's just a little too slow in the scrambles. And from what I've seen in the wrestling exchanges in the Armenian's last fight against Islam is that he scrambles incredibly well, and I don't feel like Mercier will be able to control him on the ground. And I'm going to go with the Armenian decision.
Armenian by decision.
I thought he was going to be the dog.
No. He's not. And then the big 3 fights, the final 3 fights, kicking off with the welterweight, a warm favourite with Jeff Neal taking on Niko Price. Jeff Neal's on a 5-fight win streak, looking good. Niko Price in the last 2 years has gone 4 wins, 2 losses. So bookies saying not so even with Neal as a warm favourite.
Yeah, so Neal, I feel like he's a very hot prospect coming up. He made his splash on a UFC scene with 2 very impressive knockouts. Chris Camosi's brother Bryant, he knocked out, and then he very impressive head kick knockout of welterweight Frank Camacho. So it was he came into the UFC with a lot of hype, and then in his last fight he outpointed one of the better wrestlers in the division, Bilal Muhammad. So he's made a very good start to his UFC career. He's a classy striker, and he always throws in combination, and defensively very sound. A lot of things to watch from this guy. He's one of my guys to watch coming up through the UFC. Price, he's looking to pick up back-to-back wins. He's a bit of a comeback kid, really. He was getting lit up by Tim Means in his last fight, and caught him with a punch. Means just getting a bit too carried away, and managed to knock him out. So he's always dangerous with the hands. He seems to be very heavy-handed, but I feel like he's just a bit too easy to be hit on the ground, on the feet in the striking. And Neal is just too clinical and will eventually break him down. And so I'm going with Neal to stop Price in this.
Someone that everyone knows, Chris Cyborg, interestingly had 2 losses in her career, in her pro career. Her first fight and her last fight. Her only 2 losses, but that was against Amanda Nunes, and we know how devastating she is. Takes on Felicia Spencer, a Canadian. I don't know, you'll know better than me, but she's $5 underdog, $1.15 Cyborg, so massive underdog. Spencer loves a rear naked choke, gets a lot of her wins like that, but Cyborg's got a 91% takedown defense ratio.
Yeah, so Cyborg was knocked out in her last fight. This is not the first time she's been knocked out. She's been knocked out in kickboxing fight and lion fight series. And it's just because she's prepared to exchange in the pocket. She's very aggressive. She goes forward. She backs it at power. She backs herself in the pocket, which works most of the time with over 20 wins, 17 knockouts. So there's a lot of evidence there as to why she tends to favor that exchanging with her opponents in the pockets. Very heavy-handed female. Looking to bounce back against Spencer. Spencer undefeated against her first round, gets a UFC debut against the Australian Megan Anderson. I believe Megan was the favourite heading into that fight, but Spencer managed to drag her to the ground. But in that fight, she did get hit with a lot of hard shots from Megan Anderson. And I feel like unless she's made some drastic development in her striking and she eats those same shots from the more heavy-handed Cyborg, I see this being a pretty quick night, and I'm going Cyborg by KO. No surprises here.
And then the big one, Maxi Holloway. I feel like I've seen him on Inside America's Most Dangerous Prisons type docos. He just looks like an animal. He's 27 years old, at the peak of his powers. Lost to Conor McGregor 6 years ago, and since then 13-0. He's unreal. Last start he had a loss though.
Yeah, he moved up.
So he went 6 years without a loss.
He moved up weight division and fought for the interim lightweight title against Dustin Poirier to set up the fight with Khabib. and he was outpointed in that. I feel like Dustin was just the bigger fighter in that, and picked up his first decision. But now he's moving back down to featherweight and defending his crown at featherweight against Frankie Edgar. But Holloway, last 4 fights at featherweight, he's all finished via KO. He's just a volume puncher, and he just pulls the pressure on him, breaks guys down. He defends 83% of all takedown attempts. Frankie, this is his 9th championship fight. And this is his 3rd challenge for the featherweight title. He had 2 against Jose Aldo, which he dropped. He has great head movement, great footwork, and that turns out his opponent's missing 70% of strike attempts against Frankie because he moves so well. Frankie averages 2.5 takedowns over the course of a fight, which is incredibly high, and that seems to be the reason why he has so many decision wins. 12 of his 23 wins are via decision because he can drag them to the ground and hold them there and pick up the decision victories. But I feel like Holloway's takedown defense play a huge factor in this. That 83% defense of all takedowns is the stat to watch in this fight, and I think Holloway forces us into a stand-up fight where he has the advantage. I feel like Max just outpoints and outworks Frankie on the feet and picks up the decision.
Does 27 years old versus 37 years old have a bearing? At what age do you think you start to see them wane a little bit?
MMA is it's a pretty funny in terms of a professional sport where there's so much skill involved because there's so many things to learn, whether they be striking on the ground, so many various martial arts you put your time into. So a 27-year-old obviously has the athletic advantage over a 37-year-old, but now the 37-year-old has 10 years of technique, and once you have technique, you can be more efficient and save more energy. So then the athletic advantage is not so much. So it's the athleticism versus the skill amassed over time. That's why you see MMA fighters fighting a lot later into their career, into their 30s and even into their 40s, compared with a lot of other sports, rugby, NFL, NBA. These guys are retiring in their late 20s. You're an older fighter, but it's the difference for the MMA is the skill involved.
So Maxi Holloway by
decision. Frankie's tough. I don't think he gets him out.
That's the one. UFC 240 pay-per-view on Sunday. It's normally on Sundays. It's on Sunday's 12-fight card. There's all your predictions. Great, Stan.
A few underdogs.
A lot of underdogs. Some good multis to be had. No one paying $4 like you for a knockout last week, though. But well done, mate. Look forward to your next fight.
Cheers. Thank you.